Latex bodysuit was so tight that I couldn't breathe and the fishnet ties painfully dug into my thighs. I opened the dressing room curtain and waited in horror for my mom to say something, but she looked at me in silence, turned around and went somewhere. It was clearly over the top. But a couple of minutes later, she came back with a fluffy Playboy girl tail and said it would perfectly complement my look. It all started one strange morning. I was having breakfast when my mother ran into the kitchen yelling that she needed help. I was the only one who could save her. I finished my sandwich while my mom dragged me into the car. What's going on? She started the engine and asked for my college's address. What's the point? My mom was never interested in my studies. She was at the parties all day long. As soon as we drove away from the house, my mom asked me to pretend to be her friend. I think she fell in love with the guy from my college, and now she wants to seduce him. Mom, are you crazy? We pulled up to the college and stopped at the main entrance. Mom pointed a finger at one of the guys. Here he is. My classmate, Frank? It was like an electric shock. I've been in love with him for a year. We've only talked a couple of times, but it was enough to understand that we were soulmates. And now my mother and I are pinning for the same guy. You will help me, right? My mother's voice brought me back to reality. I hesitated. This is some kind of nonsense. No one will believe that we are friends. And then my mom blurted out that if I didn't agree, she wouldn't pay for my studies anymore. I could tell by her attitude that she wasn't joking after she gave birth to me at 17. My mom never tried to get an education. I didn't want such a fate for myself. Hesitantly, I still agreed to help her seduce Frank. Hopefully she'll switch to another guy soon. My mom always does that. Mom decided that I would take her to the party where Frank would be, and then Mom would do everything herself. Scrolling through college students' Facebook pages, I found out that one guy's parents have left, and he's going to have a Playboy-style party. My mother was delighted, but I was not in the mood for jokes. I hoped at the last that rabbit ears would be enough for the costume. At the set time, we're standing on the doorstep. I was burning with shame because of the tight bodysuit. But my mom was delighted. Some drunk guys were whistling to us from the other side of the street. I pressed the doorbell hard. Hurry up and let us in. But when my classmate Anne opened the door, it turned out that everyone at the party was in ordinary clothes. Am I being played? Anne explained that the other girls were too shy to come in revealing costumes, and asked what my friend's name was. Ma? I started but then stopped. Melanie. My mother gave me a reproachful look as she came in. I almost revealed her. While my mother hovered in front of the mirror, I decided to look around the house. Suddenly, I saw Frank sweetly smiling at some girl. My stomach clenched. I didn't know he had a girlfriend. Then my mother came back, and I thought that since she had noticed Frank with this girl, she'd decide to give up her crazy idea. But that didn't happen. My mother said that some youngsters are not a rival to her, and as soon as Frank went to get them drinks, Mom grabbed a burning candle from the table and went to that girl. Mom, stop! I saw her decisively holding the candle right to the girl's hair, and her luxuriant curls burnt into flame in an instant. Fortunately, the fire was quickly extinguished, but Frank's girlfriend almost lost her hair. My mom was happy that she got rid of her rival so easily. She was about to suck up to Frank, but I heard that the guys were going to call the police. We're leaving. Just what we need, the cops. My mother gave Frank a languid look and introduced herself. God, this is so embarrassing. The next day, Mom dragged me outside to follow Frank and accidentally meet him. Mom found his Instagram page and saw that he usually spends time playing gambling machines, and she took me there. Against the backdrop of teenagers in oversized hoodies, she looked too provocative in her tight dress. Everyone was looking at us, but my mother didn't mind. She was looking for Frank. Fortunately, he wasn't there. We were just about to leave when my mom called out. Here he is, and she dragged me somewhere. Frank was playing the dance platform. how cool he was dancing. I stared at him, and of course he noticed. Embarrassed, I approached him and immediately apologized for yesterday. But then my mom chimed in. She started bragging about how he could dance on dance platforms as well as Scott Pilgrim from the horror movie. What? Before I could protest, my mom grabbed my arm and immediately dragged me to the dance platform. I didn't dance at all, and neither did my mom. But my mom tried so hard. She was even sweating. And I was helplessly twitching, hoping to get a little bit into the rhythm. I thought it couldn't get any worse. But suddenly, during the next movement, my mom brushed against me and I lost my balance. Frank tried to catch me, but I fell and twisted my leg. It hurt so bad. He examined my ankle and said that there was no fracture. I just needed to ice it. My mom began to convince Frank that I was alright. Offered to go to another platform. But Frank refused. You should have seen my mom's face. She was burning with jealousy. I went to college the next day even though my leg still hurt. Frank asked me how I was feeling at every break. It was so nice. He said I was cool. He wished we'd talked before. He did soften me up. Could we really be something? But Frank immediately destroyed all my hopes. He asked if my friend was free for the weekend. It was like a bucket of ice water was poured over me. He had a crush on my mom after all. Fighting back tears, I said I'd pass on the invitation and said goodbye to Frank. My mom was preparing for a date all evening, sorting through dresses and thinking about what makeup would suit her best. I just wanted to disappear. My life was falling apart. In the morning, when she and Frank left, I burst into tears. What should I do if things worked out for them? Pretend to be my mother's friend until I'm old? No, I can't do that. Frank may not have chosen me, but he needs to know the truth. I tried to call him, but the phone was offline. Then I began to write to my classmates. Maybe someone knew the address of Frank's cottage, but no one answered. I was already desperate, but one girl answered me. And I immediately called a taxi. As soon as I arrived, I immediately rushed to knock on the door. No one opened it, but I kept going. And finally, Frank looked out, surprised. At the back of the house, I saw my mother sitting carelessly with a glass of wine in her hands. It made me so angry. There was nothing left to lose, so I turned to Frank and told him the most important thing. My mother was visiting him, and I had been in love with him for a year. I was relieved to admit it. How unbearable it was to carry this burden. Mom jumped up from the couch, throwing her glass on the floor. She shouted that I was a traitor and ran into the street only in dress. Frank was taken aback at first, but quickly pulled himself together and said that we needed to find her. It could be dangerous in the forest. After all, we were quite far from the city. We immediately went in search of her. I was so excited. I just wanted to tell the truth, but it turned out I just messed it up. Why did Frank react so calmly? Suddenly, he said that he had known the truth for a long time. Someone from college recognized my mom at the party, and rumors spread fast. At first, it was just fun for him to watch us, but soon he really liked me. But for my mom, he had a special plan. Frank wanted her to meet his father, because she was definitely his type. I felt so ashamed that I thought my whole face blushed. We walked through the forest for a long time and called for my mom, but she was nowhere to be found. We were already cold ourselves when we suddenly came to an old bus stop. And there was Mom! She was sitting there in her little dress and was already fainting from the cold. I ran to her and hugged her. It was great that she was okay. Frank immediately gave her his jacket, and we called a taxi. We went back to the cottage. We were met at the door by a polite and handsome man, Frank's father. He was surprised to see us like this and said we could use some hot tea. I even thought that he would really be a great match for my mother. But my mother, when she looked at Frank's father, was taken aback. Without taking her eyes off him, she whispered, "Is it really you?" Then she slowly shifted her gaze and said, "Lily, this is your father. Say hello." I could feel my legs faltering. I think I just found out that I had been in love with my own brother for a year.
Hi, I'm Alexis, and I'm 18 years old. Do you think it's difficult to manage 3 children? What if there are 4 or 6 of them? I have 10 children at the age of 18. Watch the video to the end and find out how it happened that I had a whole kindergarten. I fell in love with Benjamin at first sight, and the fact that he was already 15 years older than me didn't stop me at all. He was courting me, was so wise, courageous, and caring. My parents didn't accept my choice at first, but then they accepted it. He managed to charm them and was very serious about it. So we decided together that we would get married as soon as I turned 18. After my birthday, I was really looking forward to the moment when he would officially propose to me, but it didn't happen. Benjamin delayed the conversation because the outcome could be ambiguous, even to the point of breaking up the relationship. Indeed, it was very shocking to me. When he finally gave up, I found out something incredible. I knew he was already married, and I told him right away that I didn't care. It turned out at that time, I did not let him tell a very important detail. He had 5 children. 5! Benjamin promised that it wouldn't affect our marriage in any way. With his ex-wife, he separated peacefully, communicated with the children, visited them. Have you ever learned big secrets that shocked you? Write it in the comments. The admission stunned me. 5 children. He left the family, got a divorce. It took me a long time to come to my senses and understand. Benjamin tried to explain to me that he never gave up on children and did everything to ensure that they had a father and that they did not feel the need. He said it happened in life when a marriage couldn't be fixed. Children were better off if their parents lived separately, but were friends than together with scandals. It was not easy for me to accept all that was said, but love was stronger. I said I was ready to live with it, and very soon he proposed to me. It was very original. Friends and acquaintances involved me in a big flash mob in the final, of which I received a bouquet and a beautiful ring. The preparations for the wedding went very quickly. Benjamin took everything on himself and was in such a hurry. I guess he was afraid I'd change my mind. The celebration itself was held at home. There were only the closest relatives and friends. Unfortunately, not everyone reacted positively to my choice, but I did not need the approval of others. The main thing was that I loved him. We wanted to spend our honeymoon by the ocean, and I had already started packing my suitcase and managed to spread the news to all my friends. But Benjamin suddenly came in depressed with a face as black as a cloud and said that his ex-wife died. I threw my arms around him and began to cry. How could I comfort him, help him? But he roughly unclasped my hands and fell into a chair. In the next second, he said that he could not give the children to the adoption system. He would not forgive himself for this. I thought it was a dream, and now I would wake up and everything would be as before. But Benjamin's shoulders, shaking with tears, told me that I was not asleep. I was rebelling within myself and didn't want to take on this responsibility. But on the other hand, I promised at the altar that I would be with him not only for better, but for worse. I agreed. Days of waiting passed. Children also needed comfort and coziness, and therefore the rooms should be prepared for their arrival. The tasks were not so simple. Where to find 5 children's beds inexpensively, how to place them, where to put a couple of cabinets, and what was there on the children's menu. The solution of these questions so fascinated me that I did not notice how several weeks flew by. But there were no children. Benjamin became a bit moody, irritable, and we started having conflicts. I didn't understand what was going on because we had an agreement about children's relocation. Everything was ready, so what was it? Was he grieving? What if he was afraid I couldn't do it? We just started living together and our family was already on the verge of divorce. And I asked him straight out why he didn't bring the kids home. The answer knocked the ground from under my feet, and Benjamin barely managed to catch me before I hit the floor. It turned out that he and his ex-wife had 5 children of their own and 3 adopted children. 8 children. 8 children were coming to us. All this time he had hidden them so as to not frighten me anymore, and now he was dying of shame at the thought that they might end up in the adoption system again. It was a nightmare. This doesn't happen in reality and certainly doesn't happen to me. While I was trying to recover, Benjamin managed to collect some things and left me. Yes! He decided to leave me and it was his own fault. He should have told the truth right away. Was I not worthy to know the truth? How angry I was then. And I didn't feel sorry for him at all. Have you ever been angry at someone instead of being sympathetic? I didn't expect to be so indifferent. I didn't know how to respond to his leaving. To raise 8 children at 18? I was not ready for my own yet, but there were already 8. I decided to let the situation run its course and take a break from everything. Every day, I forgot myself with friends, at parties, in cafes, at movies. I hadn't seen them for a long time and I missed them very much. At first, it was good because I was still so young and there were so many interests around. But after a couple of weeks, I felt a kind of emptiness and wild loneliness. Friends no longer gave me pleasure and entertainment seemed gray. I was suddenly torn off my half and now I was incomplete. I missed Benjamin terribly and I realized that I wanted to be with him. That same day, I stood on the doorstep of his ex-wife's house. I found the children and my husband in a terrible state. Dirt all around, mountains of unwashed dishes, leftovers in the corners. The children were dirty, uncombed, and sad. I immediately rushed to clean up and prepare food, although I did not know at first how much I needed to put cereals and salt to cook soup for 10. Benjamin was happy to see me back and tried to help me with everything. We needed to wash and iron laundry every day, not to mention classes with children, walks, and the eternal reconciliation of sisters with brothers. I was getting used to the routine of home life, but I was getting very tired. I could barely reach the pillow and fall asleep before my head touched it. Suddenly, we had a sick Lily. She was only 8 years old. She was hospitalized for several days with an allergy attack. Lily was crying so much. She asked me to stay with her because she was afraid of dying like her mother. It took me a long time to persuade her before I left. There were 7 more at home. My heart was breaking. At home, there was another problem. The older Billy, who was 14, ran away. The children told me that he was against my coming and called my father a traitor. While Benjamin was calling the police, I found Bill's notebook and his friends' numbers. I called one number after another until I found the right address. Billy was visiting a school friend. We raced there. Billy was angry and said he didn't want to see me and I didn't know how to handle a teenager who wasn't much younger than me. Then Benjamin hugged him and said that I would never replace his mother and that's not why I was in this house. We were family and should try to help each other. Thank God the words worked and the 3 of us returned home. But this did not bring peace to our family. The children and I got to figure each other out. They lost their mother, and their father brought home a new wife. They could be understood. But some time passed, and the younger ones called me Mom for the first time. And then, only then, did I feel that we were finally a family. Benjamin and I were over the moon. Suddenly, I felt a sharp deterioration in my health. I was sick in the morning, was tormented by weakness the whole day. My husband became concerned and made me an appointment with the doctor. The doctor said something incredible. I couldn't believe my ears and called Benjamin to the office. We were expecting twins! Twins! It turned out that our kindergarten will grow to 10 children. And you know, my husband and I are not afraid. Did you like my story? Support it with a like and subscribe to the channel.
I was standing at the altar next to my dad. His fiancée was about to come out. I wondered who she was. Some old gray mare, I suppose. For the entire 6 months of their relationship, I lived in a college dorm and I never got to meet her. I hope I would get along with her. And then the music began to play. The bride entered the hall. I saw happiness in my dad's eyes. After the divorce from my mom, I really saw him like this. But when she took the veil off her face, it hit me like an electric shock. Sally? Oh no, this maniac was in love with me in high school. Stalked me and threatened all the girls who were interested in me. She even dosed one of them with Brilliant Green. After graduation, I was so happy that we wouldn't see each other again. And now she was my stepmother? The preacher's voice brought me back to reality. You are declared husband and wife. My throat was dry, I froze in shock. The ceremony was over, and my dad asked me anxiously if I was alright. But I couldn't tell him the truth now. He was so happy. So I said, confused, that I was just tired. Then he smiled and led me to meet Sally, who gave me a fake smile. I could hardly restrain myself from telling her everything. They were immediately distracted by other guests, and I wandered into the stable. The only thing that could calm me down was my favorite horse, Leslie. It was given to me for my 18th birthday, when we were still a happy family. My mom lost her feelings for my dad and decided to leave the ranch and started traveling. Dad accepted her decision, even though he loved her really, and my parents broke up. I didn't understand Mom's desire to travel. Why did she like our ranch? Here was a perfect, peaceful life without any changes. I was distracted from my thoughts by a noise behind me. I turned and saw Sally standing in the middle of the stable. But before I could say anything, she threw her arms around my neck and started hugging me. We are finally together. That's why I married your father, she chirped. I immediately pushed her away. I won't let you do this to my dad, so I'll tell him the whole truth. But Sally only smiled creepily. Your father is so in love that he won't believe any word you'll say. She said it in such a predatory and vicious way that it made my hair stand on end. Who knew what this maniac is capable of? Just then, my dad came into the stable. Sally immediately smiled sweetly and whispered something in his ear. Then she gave me a furtive wink and drew him toward their guests. What a stinker. I felt a rush of heat. I definitely didn't need such changes. My thoughts were spinning. I couldn't concentrate, so I decided to wait a little while and see how Sally would behave next. So began our new happy family life. Sally behaved like a perfect wife and hostess. She cooked breakfast, cooked with her husband. Whenever Dad was distracted, she would bother me with kisses. She used to write me love notes and texts like she did at school. I was angry, but I didn't know what to do. My dad clearly loved her, but I still hadn't come up with a plan yet. I continued to endure and think. Until one night, I woke up to her crawling under the covers. Barely able to contain myself, I pushed Sally out of the room and locked the door for the first time. I could see her smirk. This incident finally pissed me. Alright, that's it. I couldn't stand Sally's antics anymore. I needed a plan right now. The next day, I learned that my dad needed to deliver one of the stallions to the new owners. This was a chance to get away from maniac Sally and think calmly about how to get her out of the ranch and out of our lives. I told Dad I'd drive the stallion myself, but Sally said she'd never been to that part of the country and she wanted to come with me. I was in a panic, not her. I immediately blurted out, "You just got married. Better go to a romantic dinner." Sally's face immediately twisted, and my dad said that I was right. He worked too hard and hardly saw his wife. Yes, but then Dad sighed heavily and went on that it seemed that the ranch was taking up too much time that he could match with his wife. Perhaps we should consider selling it? My heart sank at what I heard. No, the ranch was my home. Sally had already made my life a living hell, and now she was going to take my home away from me? Barely able to contain my irritation, I went to deliver the stallion. At least I would stay away from this maniac. When I arrived, I was met by a customer. She shyly held out her hand for introduction. I even froze, staring at the blush on her cheeks and the deep blue eyes. How beautiful she was. Her name was Dina. She was a professional jockey and equestrian. Wow. So small but strong, and she got along with horses. I immediately started asking her about equestrian sports, and we started talking. I told her about my horse Leslie and the family ranch. And Dina talked with glowing eyes about her achievements in equestrian sports. I was so easy with her. When I looked into her eyes, my heart sank. I had never experienced this before. I had to stay for a couple of days so that Sally would get used to the new environment and the owner. That's why Dina and I were always around. Occasionally, my phone vibrated in my pocket because of Sally's texts. Heck, she was ruining everything. My mood was bouncing back and forth. But I tried not to show it to Dina. We talked, ate ice cream, talked endlessly, and finally, I felt that I was in love. Dina seems to feel the same way. Thanks to Dina, these few days were magical, but it was time to go home, and I still hadn't figured out how to get rid of Sally. On the last night before we left, we sat together under a tree and talked about horses. But then that maniac Sally started calling me. I cut her off and went back to thinking and noticeably grew sad. And then Dina couldn't stand it. She said that she understood and felt that something was weighing on me. I didn't want to involve her in the story, but she said that if we had feelings and we were together, then we should solve problems together. It was so sweet. And her support gave me confidence. I gathered my thoughts and told her everything. Dina thought for a moment and then suddenly blurted out, "I have an idea." She would pretend to be my fiancé. Then Sally would realize that she couldn't do anything else, would not be able to hold any longer, and would show my dad her ugly essence. That's brilliant, D. We returned to the ranch together. I decided to check on my horse Leslie first because I missed it so much. Dee and I went into the stable and went into the stall. My heart skipped a beat. The horse was breathing very hard. I shivered. Something was wrong with him. Maybe he was sick. I wasted no time in examining Leslie. His stomach was swollen. Then Dean exclaimed that there was clearly not water in the drinker. I sniffed. It smelled like something chemical. Did Sally poison my horse? She was completely out of her mind. Luckily, it looked like Leslie didn't drink too much. I wanted to go deal with Sally, but Dee reminded me that we had to stick to the plan. She was right. We gave Leslie a drink of clean water and left the stable. Taking Dina's hand, I walked resolutely into the house. My dad and Sally stared at us in amazement. I breathed it out, "Meet my fiancé." Dina. Sally turned pale, but Dad was happy. He immediately started talking to Dee. And Sally was beside herself with anger. She slowly came up to me and clenched her fists. I hoped that she would start screaming and show herself, but she only whispered to me quietly and imperceptibly that the fiancé should disappear, or what happened to Leslie would happen to her. My stomach turned cold. Then my dad came up to us and cheerfully suggested that we had breakfast together. Sally was immediately quiet. For the rest of the day, she behaved like a good girl, and she was very polite to Dee. Dina whispered to me that this wasn't how she'd imagined the maniac, but I shook my head. Sally was a good actress and a master manipulator. The next day, Dad suggested that the family go for a horse ride. We all agreed happily, and Sally smiled mischievously and winked at me. I was worried. What if she tried to hurt Leslie again? I immediately ran to him, but the horse was fine. Whew. On the walk, Dina playfully suggested that we have a race. She picked up the speed, rose in her stirrups, and then my heart stopped. At full speed, Dee fell off the horse. I ran to her. My hands were shaking with fear. God, let it be all right. Dad immediately rushed to examine her. I walked away in shock and stood beside Dina's horse. It was my fault for dragging Dee into this. And then my eyes fell on the stirrup. It was cut. I turned around and saw Sally's malicious smile. Then I exploded and shouted that she had nearly killed Dina. Sally immediately burst into tears. Dad shouted something harsh and rude at me. I led sobbing Sally home. I was furious, but then Dee got up and came over to me. I threw my arms around her. "How are you?" Dee smiled. She had a couple of bruises, but Sally crossed the line. We need to act urgently. Suddenly, Dee asked if Sally had any secrets. Secrets? That's right. Dad gave her a private office. She often sat there and locked herself in with a key that she wore around her neck. But she was not a writer or an artist. She didn't have any job at all. Then what was she doing there then? This was a lead. We needed to check it out. Dee nodded. That's where we needed to start looking. We went home. Dad had already taken Sally to the bedroom and was clearly angry with me. He was about to say something when the phone rang. Dad jumped up and, saying that he had promised to help a neighbor, rushed out. Dee and I exchanged glances. This was our chance. First, we need to get the key. I went straight to Sally. She gave me a confused look. And I innocently apologized for yelling at her and suggested a walk. But Sally snorted in disbelief. Heck, then I breathed it out. Dina is a mistake. All I need is you. Sally was silent. Did she really not believe it? My skin crawled. But then she threw her arms around my neck, cheering. Together we went outside and walked to the barn. At that moment, I froze and reached out as if to kiss her. But instead of kissing her, I snatched the key off and immediately shoved Sally into the barn, bolted the door. Gotcha! Dee and I made a dash for the office, but as soon as we started searching, I heard a commotion outside. Dad! I went to the window and saw Dad let Sally out of the barn. She screamed that I had laid a hand on her. Heck, I told Dina to keep looking, and then I went downstairs. Just then my dad came into the house and yelled that I was completely out of my mind. I plucked up the courage to blurt out, "You're the one who's blind. You're the one who's blind. Sally's taking advantage of you." Dad was enraged by these words. He was just about to hit me when Dina appeared on the stairs and yelled at us to stop. She said she had proof. She fished a box out from behind her and took out Sally's pink diary. I read her notes aloud. How she'd been obsessed with me all those years since high school, how she'd stalked me, and how after high school she'd come up with a plan to cheat and marry my dad, so that she could poison him and be with me forever. Even I was shocked by what I heard. Of course, I myself said that Sally was a maniac. But like this? And then Sally, roaring, tried to take the diary from Dee, but in a fit of hysteria, she pushed her down the stairs. Oh no! Dad rushed up the stairs and at the last moment caught Dina. Oh my god, he said grimly that he was calling the police. When the cops arrested Sally, Dad apologized to me for not trusting me, but after such betrayal, he did not know how to live on. Suddenly the doorbell rang. Dad opened the door and froze. It was Mom. She admitted with pain in her voice that she thought a lot about what happened and missed my dad very much, but was afraid to return. And after my call, she came right away. I smiled. It was not for nothing that I dialed Mom yesterday. Dad put his arms around her and they cried together. I took Dee's hand and we hugged my parents too. I was happy. We were a family and we were together again. My parents stayed at the ranch and Dee and I started planning a trip around the world. It turned out that changes are not so terrible when a loving person is around. Did you like the video? Subscribe and like it. Support the channel, folks. Thank you so much.